I think there should be a lot more calling out of the DEI structures. I think we need to start calling out the human rights code. I think we need to start calling out the way that the education system, the education system in general, critical race theory in the education system, all of these things are actually causing a massive problem. I am very, very concerned what's happening to the Jews because I don't think it's going to stay contained to that. I think once you start normalizing that violence, that can spill out into other areas.
Melanie Bennet is an investigative Canadian journalist. She has spent years exposing how ideology and misinformation shape education and public life in this country. And recently, she returned from a trip to Israel that gave her a new dimension to that work. The treatment of Canadian Jews is a troubling reality that has really hit home in the last couple of years. Melanie went to Israel to make her own observations, and today she gives us her take on the wake-up call and a world gone mad. I am Israel Ellis, and this is The Unfiltered View. Thank you for watching and waking up. If you value independent media, subscribe, share this episode, and join the conversation. Melanie Bennet, welcome to The Unfiltered View.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure, and it's definitely our pleasure to keep, to bring in different ideas and open ourselves up to all sorts of ideas from a cross-section of people, because really we live in this world where we need to counter the various narratives out there. So really quickly about where I come from, I'm a businessman in Toronto. We have a son who's in the IDF, and he was called up on October 7th. The lawlessness of anarchy that started to take place all around the world. And we went to Israel, and along the way, we just talked to people. And one question that keeps on coming up is how. And so I ended up writing a book, A Wake Up, called Global Jihad and the Rise of Antisemitism in a World Gone Mad. That book turned into a podcast. This is the podcast we have right now called The Unfiltered View, where we are really looking for the truth on The Unfiltered View. There's a lot of non-truths out there. We can't stay silent. We have to have our voices heard, and hopefully whatever we achieve here is going to contribute, to the truth and to that and to decency. Tell us a little bit about who Melanie Bennet is.
Well, I suppose the easiest answer that would contextualize is I'm a journalist. I work for True North Wire, who is also partner sister company to Juno News in Canada. And my beat, if you want to call it that, tends to be focusing on education, but not just education. It's sort of a niche area in education. I look at what I call the radicalization of education here in Canada, and that can come in lots of different forms. And through that, over the last few years, I have come across some issues that I've been very, very concerned about, especially since October 7th, that I would consider to be pretty anti-Semitic and a very concerning pushing or sacralizing of Islam and this concept of Islamophobia. So that's like a certain area that I've been looking at in some of my reporting. So I mean, in a nutshell, that's who I am. I live in Canada. I live here in the Toronto area.
I understand that you were invited last summer on a mission to Israel. Who invited you and why?
Well, that came out of the blue. I wasn't expecting it. I felt very honored actually to be invited. I knew that there were some media missions that had been going to Israel over the past couple of years. It was Exigent Foundation who invited me to go there. And I have to be honest, I really went with no expectation. I'm not Jewish. I never really thought too much about Israel. The main reason why I realized that this was a problem, I just have to start from the beginning before talking about the Israel trip. I was sitting on my bed in my room on October 7th. It was a Saturday. I'm just relaxing. I'm, just scrolling on my phone, and I came across all of this October 7th stuff, right? So I was seeing it as it was happening on social media, and I was extremely shocked by what I saw. And I didn't know how to process any of that. So I knew this was a problem. I spent most of my life in the UK, and so I do have an appreciation for the problem with Islamism. So I inherently understood that this is an attack on Jews. This is an attack on Israel. It's absolutely horrific. And somehow, in some respects, not really that surprising. So I also didn't know much about Israel. I didn't know much about the Middle East. And so I put it to one side in many respects. I saw all of this news coming out after October 7th. And I just felt like, even though I'm a journalist, I didn't really want to talk about it because I did not feel informed. And I don't like talking about things that I'm not informed about, but it just kept these marches on the street. They kept happening and happening and happening. And I was seeing these things happening in K-12 education. We can go into that if you like, but over time, I did end up writing a little bit about these sorts of stories because it was popping up in my beat. So eventually, long story short, I 2 years later, I was invited to Israel. So I took the opportunity to kind of go as a little bit ignorant in terms of the Middle East. Like, my interest in the anti-Semitism and the rise of Islamism really is really to do with education in Canada. Like, I didn't really know much about the Middle East. So I got invited and yeah, I went, and I definitely learned a lot. I can honestly say I would go back in a heartbeat. Turns out I actually like Israel quite a lot.
So what was your reaction, to the invite? You were a little bit surprised about it, and you weren't expecting it, but why did you agree to go?
I mean, if I'm going to be really honest, it's because I say yes to things. That's really the honest answer. But also, I was curious. It had been 2 years. Like, listen, by the time I went, the ceasefire it was only a few days after the ceasefire. So I literally went right as the war, I guess, ended, right?
Okay.
And I'd seen this going on for 2 years, and it was an opportunity for me to go see it for myself, see what's going on. I knew that the tour would take us all over Israel, and I would get a firsthand view of it. Because also, it was clear to me that there was a lot of propaganda happening. I could see it through my work. I could see it on the streets. It was obvious, but I didn't really know that much. And
was this your first time in Israel?
Oh yeah. I never thought I wanted to go. I never planned to go. It just sort of came up, so I went.
Were you scared at all for your safety when you went there?
No.
But prior to going, you didn't, given everything. I mean, I was in a stairwell when Iran attacked, and that was pretty scary. But you didn't fear for your safety at all.
I didn't think twice about it. It wasn't until family or friends were like, "Oh, be careful." I'm like, "What? It's fine." So it didn't actually occur. I was aware that Israel was safe. Like, at the very least, I was aware that as a country, it's pretty safe, right? So I didn't really worry too much about that. To me, I saw it as an opportunity to go see things firsthand, and I knew that we would be around a lot of IDF, so I didn't feel in any particular danger.
When you got here and you were walking the boardwalk of the Tel Aviv by the Mediterranean, or in the marketplaces, did you feel safe? How were you feeling? And what was your thoughts of how people treated you?
Oh no, there's no question about the safety. Like, not even slightly. Even on the borders of we were on the border of Gaza, we were on the border of Lebanon and Syria. I never felt unsafe in any particular way. Israelis are. I mean, how did I explain it to people when I came back? They're remarkably normal. And I say that from a Canadian perspective, where I feel like nothing is normal here anymore, and there's a lot of takeover of the culture with all of these different identitarian groups, and everybody's vying for their own status, their own oppressed status, and so on and so forth. And I did not get that impression in Israel. I have to say that we were taken around with the tour. And so it's not like I was living with a family for 6 months. So I sort of saw it from the outside, but it just felt remarkably normal. I mean, the fact that they were so patriotic, I was kind of surprised at how many American flags there were. I know Trump was no, it wasn't Trump. It was, I think it might have been J.D. Vance who was visiting at the same time. So I don't know if those American flags were for that reason, but there was certainly a lot of Americophilia, which I wasn't expecting. But yeah, just flags everywhere, people very patriotic.
I don't think you'll find them celebrating Canada right now.
No.
Mark Carney has not been a friend. I'm in Israel right now, Melanie, and I feel safer here than I do in Canada. It upsets me terribly when you have the Prime Minister, who I saw a picture standing in a memorial beside the rabbi in Ottawa. And I feel like reaching into the screen and shaking him and shouting at him and saying, dude, this is what you get when you raise a Palestinian flag and you reward terrorists for what they did on October 7th. This is what you get when you put down Israel, when you threaten to arrest the prime minister of a nation state, of a sovereign nation state, Israel. This is what you get. This blood is on your hands. And the same thing with Australia. How do you feel?
Well, your reaction is what I would expect most Canadian Jews' reaction to be. And I know exactly what you're talking about, because I saw the social media posts. I saw the photos of Mark Carney. And yes, he was looking very solemn and in Ottawa with Jewish people in Ottawa. And this might sound a little bit controversial, but when I saw, of course, the politician is going to capitalize on those political opportunities. Like, we can expect that. We could even talk about Keir Starmer and David Lammy in the UK showing up after the attacks in Manchester. Was it for Yom Kippur? And being booed by the Jewish community over there, actually heckled. It was David Lammy being utterly heckled. And when I saw those photos, my first question was, why are the Jews not heckling him? That I found curious, because the politician is going to do that, but why are you guys letting him do that? So
this is a big problem here. Yeah.
I don't understand that. Yeah. And I'm sorry if that's maybe not a very kind thing to say, but
it's an excellent question, actually, Melanie. And it's a question that perplexes me. And it's a question that is really coming out there a lot, because if you take a look at what happened in New York, and you've got Mamdani, who's clearly anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, in the Marxist category, and he was elected on the shirt tail of many Jews who supported him. And it's a phenomenon. We call it self-hating Jews, which I don't know if I agree or not with that terminology, but I've interviewed many people, but just the people who keep silent. Jews traditionally, and this is when as growing up in Toronto, it was keep it quiet, don't raise your head, don't become a dandelion. You don't need to make such a big thing out of things. Let's not expose ourselves. There is that sense ingrained in us of, let's just keep our heads down to the ground and let's do things quietly. Well, once again, quoting Alan Dershowitz, from my interview with him this week in Israel, he said, no, you have to fight back. It's the only way is we must fight back. And lately, what I've been talking to people about is that the time for silence is gone. We need to say something. So what you bring up is not controversial at all. In fact, I appreciate it. And I think many people will appreciate hearing that. And we need to hear that. We need to hear that from people outside the community that says to the community, hey, wake up. This is a wake-up call. You should be there and you should be confronting the prime minister, because it's just they don't see, the politicians do not see the connection between the subversiveness of anti-Semitism that they have helped create by giving license. I mean, just the lack of agency and the legislation needed to shut down some of the most indecent exposure and incitement and calls to violence out there, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And they just need to shut it down, but they don't. So I think they're directly responsible.
To be fair, though, I make the same criticism of other Canadians as well, who are constantly being let down by our politicians. And it seems to be, I don't know if it seems to be a very Canadian thing to keep putting trust or keep going along with the politicians who are letting us down all the time. So it's not just the Jews, but for that particular instance, I thought right after the shootings or the terrorist attack in Australia, why would you stand next to this man who, gave Palestine a state?
Seeing him standing there made me sick. He should not have been given the platform. He doesn't deserve to be there. And, anyways, we can go on and on about that, but I think we both understand. I think everyone who's listening has been there and understands that. You say that you did not know much about Israel before the trip, before coming here. Do you think that this is a problem in the public in general, in understanding what is really going on the ground here in Israel, that people aren't as informed as they should be? Do you think we should be more educated in Canada?
I don't know if this is true, but I'm not sure that most people care that much. I think that those who do either have a connection to Israel, are Jewish, or maybe they're social justice people who are very, very anti-settler colonialism, all that stuff, right? Or maybe they're Muslims and they have an affinity for other Muslims in Palestine, so on and so forth. But actually, I don't think most people care that much. There is a problem in the media for sure. Even before going to Israel, that was pretty clear to me. I knew that Israel was a democratic nation, that it was the only Jewish nation in the area, and I didn't know so much about the politics, but it was very obvious to me that a lot of what was being portrayed in the media was incorrect, and certainly taking a side. But going there,
a bias. There's definitely
it's more than a bias. But it's more than a bias. Being in Israel, it's just outright propaganda, right? And a lot of it is fomenting this idea of Zionism, this idea that Zionism is a particular evil. It is settler colonial. It is expansionist. It is there to completely erase anyone else. It is supremacist and all these things, so on and so forth. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Like, that is not what I saw on the ground. But more than that, we have the same, very, very similar rhetoric in Canada about this idea of settler colonialism, right? This idea of a settler being this great evil. But certainly Zionism, I mean, even when I was visiting the UK, just weeks before going to Israel, talking to family members, I was quite surprised hearing them speak about Zionism as some terrible evil. And I had to have the conversation, because even then I understood that Zionism is just the self-determination of Jews having a homeland, right? It doesn't mean this ideology that is supremacist and genocidal and, all of these things. But I had to have that conversation even with family members and friends over there, right? So that, I think, has been very, very effective in turning this idea of Zionism into this great evil. And somehow people feel like they're detaching that from Jews. Right? Because we need to
dispel
that has been very effective. I think that's been very effective. And I came away from my trip in Israel, honestly, not knowing. It's like the problem is so big. Like, I'll just put it this way. The reality in Israel and what Israel actually is compared to how it's being portrayed across the world over and over and over again in all these different media outlets is so far from the truth that I wouldn't even know where to start if it was me, right? I write the stories that I can write in Canada, but it's like, how do you even start addressing the just lies constantly all the time? It's a huge problem, and I have a lot of empathy for Israel and how to deal with that, because every time you might put out one story, right, you have 100 who are coming out and spreading a completely different narrative that might be so far from the truth. But how do you disprove that when you have 100 stories for one story, right? So I don't know how you deal with that.
Do you feel at the core of these lies or false narratives that are being propagated by progressives out there, which makes no sense at all, because there's a complete conflict with the morality and the humanity that they are standing for and that they have fought for to get to a place of what I would call an advanced place in our social system. It pains me terribly. I mean, we are a progressive country. Canada is a progressive country that has, fought hard for gay rights, has fought hard for women issues, has fought hard for ethnic and for leveling the playing field for people of various economic backgrounds. And yet there seems to be this overwhelming support for a value system that is diametrically opposed to anything Canadian. You cannot have a same-sex relationship in Ramallah or in Jenin, or definitely not in Gaza. That's not really. Women are are treated very differently. It's not a true democracy. Mahmoud Abbas is in his 19th year or 20th year of a 4-year term. There are not free elections over here. People are on the take. There is a pay-for-slay policy that the Palestinian Authority has endorsed for years and still pays out a lifetime pension.
None of that matters. And so
it doesn't matter. You're saying it doesn't matter to whom? To the people who have narratives, who want to say the lies, correct?
Yes, to the ideology. None of that matters. You talk about the social justice left, and that's an area that I did definitely know a lot more about, because that's a very big focus in the work that I do in education. It is a massive problem. So even though I didn't necessarily understand the politics of Israel, I understood the social justice left and how they function. That's how I recognized a lot of the propaganda, because it's the same narratives, right? And so all of the things that you're saying are true, but none of it matters in some respects, because the client class, the oppressed client class that has been sacralized in this particular framing are the Palestinians. Therefore, they're always going to be elevated, right? They can't really do any wrong because they're victims and they're being oppressed by this white settler colonial nation. And I'm saying that as in that's in their head, because that's not the reality on the ground. But that narrative overrides almost everything. And it's like Gaudsad says it himself. It's a mind virus. And we see that all the time in Canada. So you say Canada is a progressive nation. I would agree with that. But it's bastardized this idea of personal freedom and liberty to turn into this social justice ideology that is actually really, really hateful. And even though I'm not Jewish, I'm certainly of European origin and live in Canada, and therefore I am also considered an oppressor, settler, colonial, who is there to genocide the indigenous nations of Canada, et cetera, right? And so you see those same narratives in Canada. And I don't think the thing that concerns me the most about the Jews is that it's more virulent. And it's more virulent because it has the backing, support, and fraternity of many Muslims. And within that community, you get a lot of extremist Muslims who just hate Israel because they're Jews. Right? I'm not going to do the whole not all Muslims. We know that's the case. But you have this marriage of those two that, they call it the Red-Green Alliance. And those two things together have created this really virulent, very concerning match that I have a lot of worries about. We saw in Australia, like we keep talking about this weekend, the terrorist attack there. And I keep wondering, when is that going to happen in Canada? Because not too long ago is Yom Kippur and stabbing in England.
There is definitely, I believe, a direct correlation between the words and between the slogans and between the propaganda and the incitement of hatred that is going to lead to violence. This is nothing new. This is in the 1930s. There was specific propaganda that was designed to create a moral indifference in the people so that when violence started to happen, people were sort of like, they deserved it. They sort of were detached from something as horrific as concentration camps and people being removed from their homes and their rights being taken from them. It was okay because they were Jews, and there was 5 years of propaganda that led up to it. But that is exactly what's happening here today. There is a normalization of the demonization of the Jew, and I believe that it's creating a moral indifference. And I'd like to explain to you my own experiences. I'm on Air Canada on a flight from Toronto to Atlanta, and at 35,000 feet, there's a flight attendant, and underneath her Air Canada pin is a pin with the map of Israel, but with the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the colors and of the Palestinian and the kafia. I mean, obviously, that means from the river to the sea. That means a complete genocide, annihilation of Jews. And that is on an Air Canada flight, and no one is saying a word. I'm in Collingwood at an art exhibit, and stenciled on the pavement is hashtag sanction Israel, baby killers. The IDF is responsible for this. Stop killing our children. Free Palestinians, free Palestine, free Gaza. And it's an art exhibit in Collingwood, Ontario, and people are just walking and they don't say anything. They're taking pictures in front of the Seawood sign, And they don't even say, when I go up to the town officials and I said, excuse me, I'm a resident in this neighborhood. I'm a taxpayer. And besides that, I think it's completely indecent. There's no place for the signage on the streets. Why aren't you doing something about it? And the lady responded to me, it's free speech. This is not free speech. This is an incitement for hatred. This is an obvious violation of every kind of code. But the problem is, because of the demonization and because of this normalization, there is no agency to do anything about it. There is a website out there that's live, that's been live for a while and keeps on getting updated by the Maple. You might be aware of it. And it is literally lists of Jewish people. Now, at first it started out as lone soldiers. Now it's businesses and owners of businesses. I'm on the list. And it's sure, they're really smart about it. They're taking all the public information. Guess what? It's a violation of rights. It is a criminal act. It is an incitement to hatred, and it is going to lead to violence. Someone's going to get up one morning and they're going to say, fuck it. I'm going to grab my gun and I'm going to take care of business. And that's exactly what, how bizarre, a father and a son going out and committing this murder of what was it, 13 people now? It's even more, the numbers are greater. 16 people, 16 families torn apart, their lives ended forever. The entire community, a father and a son. What happened in their brains? Was it an imam who convinced them of this? Was it the government that made them feel like this would be okay to do? It's a very unsettling feeling because, yes, you're right. It is coming to Canada, and I'm surprised. And yeah,
if you notice, a lot of the politicians who came out didn't actually call this an anti-Semitic attack. And not only that, the shooters were not checking whether these attendees were Jewish or Zionists at all. They were just shooting. It happened to be a Hanukkah event, so you can be pretty reasonably assured that a lot of people there are going to be Jewish.
They knew they were attacking Jewish people.
Yeah,
they knew it was Jewish people.
They're not stopping everyone to ask if they're Jewish. The reason I'm saying that is because anyone can be a victim of it too. If you just happen to be walking by at the wrong place at the wrong time, that happen to have Jews in it, right?
Yes.
So that's what I'm trying to get at. But a lot of the politicians, and also our media here in Canada, I noticed, aren't calling it a terrorist attack. They're not talking about the Islamist elements. They're not talking about the fact that this father and son, the son was born, I believe, in Australia. So that have to be radicalized in Australia? There's a problem. And the problem is that we keep, and I'm sorry this is going to be real controversial, but we need to address the radicalization problem within the Muslim community because it is ignored and people keep not talking about it. One of the issues that I have, where I keep coming across all the time in education, is the way that certain groups who call themselves like, the organizations leading the Muslim community in Canada tend to be either associated with or led by people associated with organizations that I'm not allowed to talk about that don't have the best of intentions. Our politicians give them grants to go into schools. One of the stories that I had is not too long ago, the Ontario K-12 curriculum, I think it's grade 11, 12 world religions course in the curriculum, uses jihad. It prompts teachers to basically teach jihad as a misunderstood struggle, right? It's just this struggle that's misunderstood in the media, and we really need to teach kids that it's actually this really great thing. And there's all these teacher prompts on how to teach about jihad in a positive, non-Islamophobic way, if you want to call it that. There's absolutely no discussion on the horrific crimes carried out in the name of jihad all over the world over the past however many decades at all in this curriculum, right? So there's a lot of whitewashing of these things, and all of it
and celebrating and vilifying and demonizing. And there's a friend of mine, and she is the principal of a school, and I cannot say where or who she is because she's intimidated. She's scared of losing her job, her pension, and she is traumatized by every meeting with the Toronto District School Board that she has had to attend, where they bring in people where she feels completely marginalized and betrayed. And yet when she raises her voice, she is told that she is being Islamophobic and that she is not sensitive to the cause. And it's really upsetting. Melanie, at the core of all this, would you agree that it's just plain anti-Semitism?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think a lot of people who are maybe on the social justice left really believe that they have an issue with like Zionism, because I think that they might misunderstand what that even means. I don't think they're all necessarily anti-Jewish, although I think that's a really big part of it. But where is this anti-Semitism coming from? And I think people need to start being honest about that, right? It's coming from ideologies, and those ideologies, from what I can tell, have I guess bastardized human rights legislation, human rights way of looking at things, the diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that have been put in place. This oppressor oppressed way of looking at the world, and so in that framework, well, the Jews, or they might call it Zionists, but the Jews are definitely viewed as this rather large oppressor. But they're not the only one. I mean, people like myself would be viewed in that particular way as well. So is it just anti-Semitism? I guess some of it is. I think a lot of it is. But it's driven by these frameworks and ideologies that are embedded within our policies. And I think if we were able to address those more honestly, and we could actually start repealing some of these terrible policies, I think we might start, and also applying the law. So, for example, we have a lot of protests on the street here in Canada. A lot of them do actually break laws. They destroy property. They incite violence. If you actually applied the law and had a show of force, I think you could or just reduce a lot of that visibly. But then you still end up with people who have those particular feelings, which is why the education system is, in my opinion, K-12 especially, is actually really, really important what's going on right now, because we're not teaching kids the best thing. So
well, not only that, but we're creating a syllabus that essentially is hateful and is certainly unbalanced, and we're creating a generation to think a certain way. And really, the point is that this, you're right. When people are shooting into a crowd, they're not asking if everyone is Jewish who they're killing. And that is actually a very good point, because we're in creating this generation and in educating our children, we're actually paving the way for the destruction of Canada.
Yes.
The destruction of everything that we believe in and everything that we fought hard for. What for? This bizarre partnership between the progressives or the left or the Marxists into this, because, and I believe it is at the core of it is anti-Semitic. You talked about language, and you talked about how, we're not calling things what they are. Well, right after October 7th, Catherine Tate, who was the then president of the CBC, instructed journalists in a memo not to use the word terrorists when they were referring to Hamas. There was resistance fighters, or there was militants. These are not only a terrorist organization that is recognized as a terrorist organization, and therefore the people who belong to such an organization, it would not be too far out there or unreasonable to deem them as terrorists. But what they did was a horrific terrorist attack. When I published my book, when I was shopping around the manuscript for the wake-up call, I shopped it to a very well-known publisher in Canada that I've published with before, and I was absolutely blown away by the email I got. And the first email I got was, hey, this is really well put together. It's a fantastic story. You've really identified and you've captured what happened on October 7th and the future. However, we're not publishing anything to do with October 7th because it's a story that's unfolding. That's the email I got. Then I pressed my contact, my top contact over there, and I said, can you please elaborate on that? And this is what he said. And blew me away, fell out of my chair. The exact words I've got, but it's something to the effect of accusations of rape, beheading of babies, desecration of bodies, kidnappings, burning of homes, burning of people alive in homes. These are unsubstantiated claims that may be exaggerated and are conflicted in the media, and therefore we cannot be part of publishing it. I tell you, Melanie, it was a moment where I just had to catch my breath. And I've heard this before. I've heard the words come out of the playbook of these corrupt, anti-Jewish naysayers out there, people like Finkelstein, for example. Of course, they get the Jews, they get people who claim they're Jewish to do their dirty work, using words like exaggerated, using words like unsubstantiated. You couldn't have a situation more clear when terrorists are wearing GoPros and filming the event and documenting it. The evidence is overwhelming, and the fact that people can't say what really happened.
There are not that many Jews in the world. I don't know. How many are there? Like 10 million? 20 million?
I think, I hate to count Jews, but I think that we're somewhere around the 15 million mark. 15.
Yeah, it's not a lot. And
it's a fraction compared to, yeah.
Right now, there are many people who have a predisposition to being anti-Semitic. Okay. We know that. That is a thing throughout the world. There are not that many Jews. And so, I mean, just in Toronto, I don't even know the percentage, but it's very, very small. Right. And so you have way more social justice warriors than that. You have way more Muslims willing to be on the streets from that. So you have huge numbers who are willing to put a lot of energy and time in advocating, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, blah, 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 blah. And so one of the things that I've done, because I think we share a problem with the same ideologies, and those ideologies of ideologies of victimhood to give people status. Okay, whether that's Islamist or whether that's social justice ideology, they sort of share that same narcissistic victimhood impulse, right? They're going to cry all the time because they're being victimized and so on and so forth. So I agree that a lot of this is anti-Semitic. I agree. But I wonder how useful has that been, using, like, pointing that out all the time? Not that it shouldn't be pointing. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, say what it is, but why not go on the defensive rather than be on the offense? Go on the offensive rather than be on the defensive, because taking the position of this is anti my group, right, is kind of going on that defensive position. Whereas if you go on the offensive and you start talking about the things that are really creating that anti-Semitism and gathering together to attack them, to be offensive towards them, that might have more of an impact. You might get more people coming alongside as well. And the reason I'm saying this is because this is the stuff that I see in schools and I write about, and I'm constantly trying to find a new way to kind of point that out. Raise the attention, point the flag, like point to the source of the problem, try to get people on board to see that it's not just one group that's suffering from this. So the things that I talk about, the ideologies that I point out in education, they might impact Jews, but they also impact a lot of other people who are not viewed as the elevated, sacralized client group. Because I worry about, I am very, very concerned what's happening to the Jews, because I don't think it's going to stay contained to that. I think once you start normalizing that violence, that can spill out into other areas. But I'm concerned that certainly here in Canada, but they don't want to talk about the social justice. They don't want to talk about the Islamism.
So what would, as an example, that type of proactive stance, what should it be, or what would it look like?
I think there should be a lot more calling out of the DEI structures. I think we need to start calling out the Human Rights Code. I think we need to start calling out the way that the education system, the education system in general, critical race theory in the education system. All of these things are actually causing a massive problem.
It is calling out the extreme radicalization of concepts like DEI, for example, that have become endemic with this partnership and prompting and promoting almost this anarchy of lawlessness in these protests and in these encampments, and that hey, we've taken an idea that is actually respects the values. Who's gonna, I completely agree with the fact that we are a diversified society, and I believe in equality. I believe in equality based on merit, though. And I believe in inclusion, and I believe inclusion based on listening to the rules of the social contract and participating and contributing and on merit. And I believe in all that. But what's happened is that it's lost its mind. It's
completely lost its mind.
Yeah, it's gone mad, and it's being used, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because we've worked so hard. And when I say the word progressive, I mean that we have really progressed. We've really come a far way in terms of our attitude towards sex and towards lifestyle and towards just ethnic background. So for me, as a Jewish person growing up in Canada, I never really experienced any direct anti-Semitism. After October 7th, I was completely in shock that I couldn't believe that this has been underlaying this whole time. I feel betrayed. I feel duped this whole time that I grew up believing in the greatness of this country. I ran for member of parliament. I was involved in many different, Canadian experiences and the system. I love this country. I love Canada, and I feel betrayed by Canada. And it's very painful right now for me as a Jewish Canadian. It is very painful.
Yeah, but that's because progressive doesn't mean what you've just described. Like, we've gone way beyond that. So if I just take you into one letter of the DIE, equity, right? It's not treating people equally. It is treating people differently based on their identity status, right? So we want everyone to be, or not every individual to have equal rights, but every group to have equal outcomes, right? So that's what the equity is. You match that with this new concept, culturally relevant, culturally appropriate, right? This is where you use this equity plus maybe, we have to make space for the non-dominant cultures to participate as a group equally, right? So all of that sounds kind of okay on the surface, but then if you apply that to policing, Toronto is a very, very, and I'm sorry I'm going to use this word, but very woke city, certainly under Olivia Chow. And so the police have very much adopted DEI policies, like a lot of institutions. So we think about that that equity, mix that with the culturally appropriate, culturally relevant, right? So you see just ignoring a lot of the violence on the streets, like things that no other group of people would be able to do. So if you have, this is why a Jew could be wearing a Israel flag and they'll get arrested when there's like 100 people throwing rocks at a business, right? They won't
it's
go
the
after.
Exception of the Jew. It's the exception to the Jew. It's exception because of the person being Jewish. To me, that's anti-Semitism. I don't want to focus on the negative.
Some of it is going to be, a lot of it is going to be anti-Semitism, but some of it is literally in those policies as well. That's why I'm saying it's not just anti-Semitism, because you see this similar sorts of things happening with other protests where the client groups that are viewed as the sacralized ones don't get arrested, whereas people who might be pushing back, and it could be other Canadians. For example, you've seen protests where I don't necessarily agree with these, but I'll give an example. These like Canada First kind of protests, right? Like they're not really my thing, but those people will get arrested, whereas all the people protesting them being actually violent, so doing Antifa violence, they don't get arrested. Now, they're not really Jewish, but it's the same dynamic because of the same structures.
It's a double standard. Let's focus on uncovering something that isn't only about the Jews. It affects all Canadians. When you have a movement that has gone off the rails like DEI, when you've got all of these other progressive movements that have gone off the rails, we got to call it out because the Jews are just the front line. Israel's just the front line in the global jihad. Once that falls, the rest of you are done. Enjoy Sharia. See you later, Sharia. Enjoy it. Hey, I do want to say something positive though, Melanie, and I want to get back to what happened at Bondi Beach. And this has to be said. There was one hero. There was one person, a fruit vendor, that that approached one of the terrorists from behind and disarmed him. Chances are he saved many lives by doing that action, a heroic action at risk to his own life. And I want to point his name out. I believe, I'm sorry, I don't have his exact name in front of me.
Ahmed Al-Ahmed?
That's correct. He is a Muslim. He put his life at risk. And I was when I saw that, I was like, I actually saw light. And that was my light. Even in the worst of tragedy, the light that I saw was that somebody from the Muslim community with a Muslim name, it was him who stopped, who heroically probably saved many, many lives. And maybe that out of this terrible tragedy is perhaps some kind of light that is flickering there that says, hey, that there's actually an opportunity here for reasonable people, for all people to live together, and that there's a very small number of people who are actually these radicals. I'd like to believe that. I'd like to believe that, Melanie. And some people might tell me I'm delusional and what have you, but what happened, and I got to give the man credit, and I got to thank God today for him being there and for him showing that type of heroism. And I got to give him the credibility and to say that is a very positive thing that we should celebrate. That is light to me.
Yeah, there are good people in the world.
There are good people, and it's a terrible thing that is what is happening out there today in this world gone mad, that the good people are overshadowed by the very evil people, by the very bad people. There's a special place in hell for all these people to go ahead and to use the deaths of innocents for your own agenda. I think that you out there, anyone who's listening to this episode, I know that some of you are listening because I get your hate emails. Thank you for letting me know who you are. This is a real strike against your soul. You're not going to get, nothing good is going to happen from it. Get on the right side of humanity, get on the right side of morality. So, Melanie, we're coming up at the end here, and I really enjoyed our conversation today. I want to thank you for being an ally. Thank you for standing up and to speak words of truth and to call it out when it's so much easier to go with the flow. It's so much easier to just follow the crowd, if you will, like many other people have done. And I'm absolutely, impressed, and not that you need me to be impressed, but I find your courage to be, and it's important because your courage could be infectious to other people to show their courage. And that's why it's important to call it out and to say it.
Well, I can't take all that praise. I think my personality is one that calls things out before thinking too hard about it. And I don't understand why more people aren't doing that themselves. Like, that's the thing that I can't wrap my head around, because it's natural for me. If I see something that's awful, then you have to do something about it.
You say something. And that's decency. And that's the way it should be. When you see your fellow neighbor fall on the ground, you go up and pick him up, him or her up. When you see someone robbing somebody, you go ahead and it's the decency of humanity to look out for each other. Because at the end of the day, we all are our brothers and sisters' keeper. And when God comes to us and asks us, what did you do? We cannot say that question. We cannot say that we didn't know. I'm sorry, we didn't know. No, there's enough media out there, and there's also the sense of decency that we're born with. Everyone knows what they're doing is decent or indecent. It's a natural instinct. Melanie, if you could put one sentence on every Canadian front page tomorrow, what would it say?
Oh, God. One sentence?
One headline. What would your story be? What would your message be to this world?
God, I wish you would have asked me that ahead of time. I could have come up with something really clever.
That's the idea. We got to put you on the spot.
I don't know about a well-structured sentence, but I would definitely put out a warning about the way that Canada is being taken over with ideology and how people are doing things. I keep wanting to say nobody's doing anything about it. That's not true. Obviously, my organization does, a lot of other people do, but it just seems like so few people are actually able to or willing to call it out and deal with it for fear of losing their jobs. Like your friend was talking about losing her job. And I get it. It's difficult. A lot of people are in regulated professions, for example, psychologists, doctors, things like that. And sorry, this is not a sentence. This is more of like a soliloquy, but we need to stand up. We need to, because I know there are many, many people in this country that do actually agree with many of the things that we're saying, but that don't want to actually talk about it either to their friends, to their family, talk about it at work. They're fearful. But the longer that we're silent, the longer that we keep it inside, or we just secretly read the True North articles, for example, the worse this is going to get for everybody. Right? Because the louder the opposition is going to be, like that social justice left, that Islamist alliance, they're not going to get quiet. They're not going to suddenly go away. They're going to get louder and louder, and it's going to become more of a problem. So we actually need to speak up.
Yeah. And I just read in the National Post this past weekend that the federal government gave $100,000 to an organization on the basis that they would fight anti-Semitism. And the organization is a Palestinian
the Toronto Palestinian
group.
Families.
Okay, hello.
Yeah.
How does that work? Don't people see that it's bizarre, that it's gone crazy? Okay. Yeah, Melanie, thank you very much. You're right. Silence is no longer an option. We're asking, Melanie and myself, we're asking you, the listener, please, silence is not an option. Speak up. Melanie, if people want to get in touch with you and watch your podcast, can you tell us, first of all, what is the podcast called?
I have a weekly show with, it's on the Juno News YouTube. It's called Disrupted. It's political, cultural. I often talk about education. Free speech is a big area as well. Just the general culture, a lot of culture war stuff. I just had a story about parents being forced to do land acknowledgements, and a legal case that came from that on my last show, for example.
I hate that.
So you can watch that on Juno News. It's called Disrupted. I also have all of my articles published on Substack. It's just Melanie Bennet on Substack.
Okay. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, Melanie?
Oh, well, okay. So you can email me. I always like to talk to people. If you have any stories or anything that you want to discuss, it's melanie.bennett@truenorthwire.com. Also on my Twitter, Real Fingal Dusty, the email is on my bio there as well.
Thank you very much. Melanie Bennet, thank you very much for coming on the Unfiltered View. We are the seekers of truth. And as you know, and as we both know, independent media, the currency of independent media is liking our podcasts and subscribing to our channels, because it tells us that these efforts are being supported. It encourages us to move forward, and we like engagement, don't we? We like engagement. I like people commenting. I don't care where your comments come from, whether they're for or against, or you think I'm going to want to hear it. Let's not use the expletives, please, and there's no need for that. But certainly, whatever your position is, we read. I mean, I know I read all comments that come into me, and everything that comes in. I'm sure you do too, Melanie. And it shapes and forms. For me, it forms how I think about things too. So I want to hear from you. I want to hear that engagement. It's very important. You made the choice to tune in today. If you've gotten this far in the podcast, you've made the choice to tune in when you could have made the choice to tune out. And so we thank you, and we thank you ahead of time for saying something, for writing your politician, or standing up for what you believe is right, and not allowing what's going on, what's wrong, to just go on, because it's going on with your tax dollars. It's going on with your say-so. And when you're quiet, you're actually complicit. So it's time to speak up. Thank you once again, Melanie Bennet, for coming on the Unfiltered View. You always had the choice to tune out. I am Israel Ellis, and this is the Unfiltered View. Our currency in independent media is you liking this episode. If you like it, sharing it with others, commenting, subscribing to my channel, subscribing to our newsletter at israelellis.com and on Substack.